Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of What's That Whiskey here on Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron and today I've got two blind samples to nose, taste, and review for all of you. This is a fully blind review. I have absolutely no idea what is in either of my two glasses, but I am gonna find out at the end of this video by revealing it to myself out of this envelope. So very quickly, I wanna say thank you to a generous Patreon supporter and friend of the channel, Mike C, for sending these samples my way and sending this reveal envelope my way. It's a lot of fun to make these What's That Whiskey videos for you guys, so let me know in the comment section if you're enjoying this new series on the channel. But again, I'm gonna be reviewing these fully blind. I'll give you my thoughts along the way, whether I like them, dislike them, try to put these into some sort of context, and especially doing these as a pair, I think it's gonna be interesting to go back and forth. You're actually gonna find out well before I do at the end of the video what is in both of these glasses. I'm gonna put it somewhere along the bottom of the screen. It's either gonna be around the first nosing or the first sip. So here we go, we've got two blind reviews, a little fun guessing game here. I'm gonna try to guess age, proof, distillery or state, whether I think it's finished, type of whiskey, and maybe a bottle guess as well. And yes, I do have my notebook out in front of me because sometimes I forget the guesses that I make along the way if I have more than one sample. So without further ado, let's get into this now. Let's go ahead and start with glass 1 or glass A. Let's check it out now on the nose and see what we get. All right, so glass A on the nose. This is a very interesting whiskey. It's got a very heavy presence of something in the glass. And I know that sounds silly, but it's either a double oaking or a toasted barrel finish. Maybe it's a craft whiskey, but I'm not entirely sure just yet. It could also be just a finished whiskey. It's got a big pungent punch of fruit on the nose, almost like rotten apples or apple skins or something like that. Yeah, in some ways, I even feel like this could be a little bit of a rum finished whiskey, but at the end of the day, I don't wanna make too many guesses up front here, but first impression is that pungent is the right word for this whiskey. It's very concentrated, but in a way that makes it feel like that concentration is coming from a secondary barrel. And if not, then this has definitely got to be some sort of craft whiskey. It's extremely fruit forward. It's very, very oak forward. And there also are some traditional bourbon notes hanging out, but those are more relegated to the background where on the surface, I'm really picking up a lot of intensity on the nose. So that's just kind of an overall first impression. Before I dive in on the palate here, because I have two samples, and because they're both really dark whiskeys and presented as a pair, I feel like there might be a link between the two. I don't know what that link would be. So let me just quickly nose glass 2 now, and let's see what's going on with this one on the nose. All right, so glass 2 on the nose, there's definitely a connection to glass 1 in the sense that it not only is as dark as glass 1, these are both extremely dark whiskeys, but it is as pungent as glass 1 on the nose as well, but in a little bit of a different way. So glass 1, very fruit forward, like I said, almost like rotten apple or apple skins, but maybe even apple brandy if I'm thinking of a finishing cask. But this glass 2, this is much more of a double oaked or toasted American type finish is the way that it's coming off on the nose. I would bet a lot of money that glass 2 is an American oak toasted or double oak finish. Like that's just what it feels like on the nose. But again, both of these could end up being craft whiskeys just because of the fact that there's so much influence from the barrel on both of these. So this is gonna be deceptive, not only in terms of finish or extra maturation, but also in terms of age. I think they're gonna be kind of hard to pin down. So I'm gonna forewarn you right now, I might do very terribly in this episode as far as my guesses go. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and review these now. So let's go glass 1 on the palate. So here we go, cheers. All right, and glass 1 is as pungent as the nose would suggest. This is a very interesting whiskey. And part of me, like as far as my knee-jerk reaction goes, part of me wants to immediately dislike this whiskey, but part of me actually really enjoys it because there's so much going on here. If you told me this was some sort of cigar blend, or if this was some sort of, combination of finishes like apple brandy and vermouth and maybe even like a sherry or a port finish all kind of blended together, I would totally believe you. At the same time, if you told me this was a Texas whiskey with 0 finishes, I could kind of also believe you on that as well. So this is a very interesting whiskey. It's, in my mind, it would be a divisive whiskey, and so this is not gonna be for everybody. For me on first sip, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt. We're gonna do another sip here in just a second, but as I'm getting into the finish now, it's a little bit of a drier finish, very, very tannic, which makes me feel like there might be some red wine going on here. Maybe, again, like that apple brandy thing I talked about, but maybe also red wine. It's hard to talk. It's so tannic and so mouth drying here in the finish. Having a little hard time forming sentences. So let's go back in for one more sip. Yeah, this is such an interesting pour. I think the most confusing part about this whiskey is that I feel like I'm getting two very distinct layers now. Whereas up front, all those pungent fruits, very intense, like, I mean, good proof on this. Again, very tannic in the finish, but it's starting to pull itself apart now on this second sip where I'm sensing an upper layer of pure finish, whatever that finish is. And I feel like I'm sensing this layer underneath that, which is more traditional bourbon notes. And oddly enough, the layer at the bottom of this feels like it's almost like an MGP type profile. It's almost like that 36% rye, high rye bourbon MGP profile where I'm picking up some citrus notes. I'm picking up some of those like darker fruit notes that you get on that, you know, that 36 rye MGP, especially at a little bit of an older age. But I'm just confused by Glass One. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's terrible. Again, I think it's divisive. And so for me, this is just fine. This is like a C+, B- kind of whiskey. And I'm so confused by it. And I'm going to be interested to see what it is during the reveal. I think if I had to lock in some guesses here, as far as age goes, I don't think this is terribly old, but it's also not coming off particularly young. And you know what? I think I have to do a third sip here just to kind of get my bearings and make these guesses. And as I continue sipping this now, it gets more and more traditional as my palate acclimates to whatever that pungent note is on the top of the whiskey. So it's actually really starting to demonstrate some age at this point. I'm gonna go kind of crazy here and call this a 9-year product. I think the proof on this, I think it's got a pretty healthy proof to it. I'm gonna say 122 proof. I do think it's finished, but I'm not exactly sure what kind of finish. I would call it a combination of finishes, which is a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm gonna say that there's some sort of wine and or apple brandy. So we're gonna write this down here. Distillery or state. This is a weird guess, but I'm gonna say MGP. I feel like there's this hint of MGP peeking out underneath, underneath the finish of this whiskey, and I'm gonna call this a bourbon. So now, with those guesses in place, let's move on to glass number 2. Let's go back to the nose here. These are just some freakish whiskeys, and I think Mike did a good job pairing these two together because there are similarities and there are definitely differences. So glass number 2 now. Let's go back to the nose very quickly before we get this onto the palate. Yeah, and just like I said before, this definitely comes across more of like a toasted or double oaked finish. I'm getting marshmallow notes, I'm getting graham crackers, very s'moresy, but it's edging into that rubber territory on the nose that is something that kind of turns me off. It feels almost like a Michter's toasted rye on the nose. So let's go to the palate now, cheers. All right, so I really think this could be a Michter's toasted rye on the palate. It comes across with those coffee notes up front, heavy barrel influence, again, that kind of slightly rubbery, s'moresy profile. But as it rolls back, I'm picking up a lot of spice, a little bit of like a wintergreen rye spice. And even if this is not Michter's toasted rye, which is a little ambitious to make that guess right off the bat, even if that's not true, this feels like a double oaked rye whiskey or a toasted rye whiskey. I would pretty much lock that guess in right away. And so as far as proof goes and as far as age goes, I think the proof is a little bit lower than Glass One. This feels more like maybe like a 108 type proof. It's a little more easy drinking. And then as far as age goes, I don't see this actually being a very old product. It feels like a heavy toasted influence on the nose and on the palate, but the base whiskey underneath that doesn't feel particularly old. So I'm gonna say this is a 6-year toasted rye whiskey. That's what we're gonna go with right now. And I think I'm onto something here, but we're gonna find out. I'm gonna make my bottle guess. I'm gonna make it Michter's toasted rye, so the state and everything is figured out already. And that's a pretty easy one to go through very quickly. As far as whether or not I like Glass 2, I do like it to some degree, but this rubbery toasted finish that so many people get on these whiskeys, I don't know if it's just me or if others out there would agree with me as well. I feel like a lot of them are overcooked in that second barrel and they develop this very intense char, which then turns rubbery to me. So if you've ever had this experience on a whiskey, please let me know in the comments section or just tell me I'm crazy, because that could be the case too. I do sense that Glass 1 is actually older than Glass 2. And so let's go ahead and do the reveal. I think these are some pretty freakish whiskeys. Let's see how these guesses did. So, Mike, let's see how much you tricked me, because I know I didn't do that great on this episode. So, here we go. Okay. Wow, so this is very unexpected. Wow, this is unexpected. You know what? Hats off to Kings County for putting these together, because these are both peated whiskeys. And this is funny in some ways, because on glass one, as I talked about those pungent notes, this is crazy. So as I talked about those like pungent notes, I kept getting this smoky whiff of something, and I'm like, I think it's just smoky because it's finished. Like, it feels like it's been put in a second barrel, and that's probably why it's smoky. And so I didn't even say anything on this video about that note. And here we go. So let me read this out now. You guys have already seen this on the screen. So glass one, Kings County, 8-year single barrel. I said it was 9, so pretty close. The proof is ridiculous. This is 147.6 proof, or 73.8% ABV. I said 122 proof. Yeah, I would have always been low on the proof here. So peated bourbon, I guess it's not finished. I guess it's probably distilled this way. So yeah, I'm wrong on the finish. I think that peated thing was coming off with all of these interesting fruity components, and with that smoke kind of kicking it out, it felt like a finished whiskey. So this is a big miss. This is big miss on the proof. It's a big miss on the style of whiskey. I did say it was bourbon, but I would have never guessed peated. So instead of licking my wounds here, let me just move on to glass two, because there's more coming here for us. So glass two, another Kings County. This is a peated rye. So batch number 4 is what this says. It is cask strength at 63.8%. I mean, I'm like 20 proof points low on this. It says it's a 5-barrel blend. It doesn't have an age. I have no idea, but Kings County is usually between like 4 and 8. I said this was a 6-year whiskey. So let's just give me that. Just give me the points on that one. I did say it was a rye whiskey, but instead of being a toasted rye, it's a peated rye. The fact that I was pretty lukewarm about both of them. I mean, glass one I actually liked more than glass two, but the fact that I was lukewarm about these, it kind of tracks for me and my experience with Kings County, which is very hit or miss. I never tend to like peated American whiskeys as well, so all of this does make sense to me. I think glass one actually would appeal to some folks, but glass two is interesting. I mean, maybe glass two is going to be something where people that like toasted ryes are going to be into that. But by and large, I think with Kings County, I tend to always get a little too much barrel influence on these whiskeys. And so without any more debriefing, we're just going to wrap this up here. I'm going to just take the L on this video. Mike, great freaking blind here, man. I would have never guessed peated, but I'm going to sit with these for a few more minutes after I get done filming this video. That's going to do it, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon for more. And we've got some merch on the way as well. Cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.